All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books presents best-selling author Marisa Silver, who will discuss her new novel set here in St. Louis, The Mysteries. Silver will be in conversation with St. Louis KMOX's radio and author of Only in St. Louis, Charlie Brennan. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Marisa and Charlie, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We are very happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place, and do that through books. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. And I don't know if I can get in close enough, but Marisa has been so nice to sign book plates for us, so all of our copies are signed. Purchasing a signed copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you so much for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event. So you can type your questions as a comment. You can do that at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. Our May and June are packed with incredible events for readers of all ages and all interests. About tonight's book, The Mysteries. From the New York Times bestselling author of Mary Coyne, a masterful, intimate story of two young girls joined in an unlikely friendship whose lives are shattered in a single unthinkable moment. Miggy Brennan is a wild and reckless 7-year-old with a fierce imagination hell-bent on pushing against the limits of childhood. Ellen is polite, cautious, and drawn to her friend's bright flame. While the adults around them adjust to unstable times and fractured relationships, the girls respond with increasingly dangerous play. When tragedy strikes, all the novel's characters grapple with questions of fate and individual responsibility, none more so than Miggy, who must make sense of a swiftly disappearing past and a radically transformed future. Written with searing clarity and surpassing tenderness, The Mysteries is that's a typo. The painful ambiguities of adulthood and the intense perceptions of an indelibly drawn child to offer a profound exploration of how all of us at every stage must reckon with life's abundance and unsolvable mysteries. Maria Semple, the New York Times bestselling author of Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and Today Will Be Different, who we have had at the store, says, Marisa Silver's vividly alive and wondrously precise The Mysteries stirringly explores marriage, friendship, betrayal, and a shattering moment of loss that offers grace and salvation. At its pulsing heart center is the delightful and ungovernable Miggy, a heroine and novel I won't soon forget. And Mary Beth Keane, the New York Times bestselling author of Ask Again Yes, says, the central question of this richly layered novel asks how well we can truly know another person. The characters here came to life for me, and I felt in my bones their loneliness, their sorrow, along with their moments of generosity, their joy. I will think about them and root for them for a long time. And now about tonight's speakers. Marisa Silver is the author of 6 previous works of fiction, including the novels Mary Coyne, a New York Times bestseller, and Little Nothing, a New York Times editor's choice. Her short fiction has appeared in The New Yorker and been included in the Best American Short Stories and the O. Henry Prize Stories. Silver has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the New York Public Library's Pullman Center. She teaches at the MFA program for writers at Warren Wilson College and lives in Los Angeles, but is joining us not even from there. Charlie Brennan is the author of Only in St. Louis and co-author of Walking Historic Downtown St. Louis and Here's Where. A Guide to Illustrious St. Louis. He hosts the Charlie Brennan Show on KMOX, CBS Radio in St. Louis, and Donnybrook on PBS's KETC. He lives in St. Louis with his wife Beth and 2 children. And now, I am so happy and proud to welcome for Left Bank Books our guests for the evening, Marisa Silver and Charlie Brennan. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks, Shane. Hi, everybody. Hi, Marisa. And I think we first of all, let's thank everybody at Left Bank Books for being so wonderful as always, and what a great civic treasure this great bookstore is. Marisa, congratulations on a powerful book that is going to have people talking about it once they read it, and I hope they pick up a signed copy at Left Bank Books. Would you give us the honor of maybe reading a portion of your work just to start off our conversation?
Absolutely. And I too want to thank Left Bank, which is truly one of my favorite bookstores in the country. And thank you, Charlie, for doing this with me. It's a wonderful thing to have you as my interlocutor today. I'm going to start by reading you just the opening of the book. Just a brief passage. I think too much reading on Zoom is not always a good thing, but I wanted to give you a little taste of the book. So here we go. They are running. There is no reason to go slow. They run out of Miggy's bedroom, down the stairs, through the living room, skipping over the albums that lie scattered across the floor. Miggy nimbly avoids Brubeck, Evans, and Monk, but she wants to crush them too, to hear the satisfying snap of the records under her keds, to feel the momentary pulse of destruction. No, her mind says. Why not? Because no, her mother would say sharply. Jean's reactions are 1 part anger and 2 parts fear. The fault between those feelings align Miggy's senses in the quaver of misgiving that passes across her mother's face when she wants to reprimand her daughter. It is a line Miggy can't resist treading, the same way she must trouble a loose tooth, the sharp pain and dull tickle equally irresistible. Who are you? Her mother asked after Miggy shattered the back window of the station wagon with a rock, or drew a butterfly on the living room rug, because a rock so dense in the hand must be flung, and a magic marker, its tip as wet as a dog's nose, must draw. I am Miggy, she said, but of course her mother knew that. The words mother and father didn't exist without the words Miggy. She is the reason for them. I am Miggy, she declares now as she dances around the albums, imagining them as lily pads, imagining herself as a fairy so light she can land on the water between the pads and not drown. Or maybe the albums are the water and the space between our leaves the size of elephant feet, because everything is always itself and the inside out of itself. A shirt, a lie, vomit, a dream. I am Ellen, Ellen says more quietly, because this is not her house. These are not her father's records. Those are not her parents' empty tumblers sitting on the coffee table, where water rings and cigarette burn marks are branded into the wood. Will you stop just for 1 minute? Jean always says. But even when Miggy tries as hard as she can to stand still, something inside her sparks like the telephone wire that whipped across the street during last winter's ice storm, spitting electricity into the frigid air. She bursts with a desire to move, to speak, to sing, because there is so much. There is so much all the time that even if she could spread her arms wider than the universe, she still could not hold it all. There are the mosquito bites that she is not supposed to scratch. There are starbursts of blood on her arms and shins because she can't help it. There is knowing what she is supposed to do and not doing it, and knowing how she is supposed to behave and misbehaving. It makes her skin prickle. It makes her choose a grape popsicle, but then wish she'd chosen red so that her lips would be painted in defiance of her mother, who says that makeup is not for children. Her rage at the injustice overcomes her. She is mad at the popsicle and mad at her mother, who always says, choose one, but how and why? Thanks.
Let me just say, I was going crazy when I read that and that she was jumping on the albums. I thought, oh my goodness. You maybe had to have lived through the age of vinyl to appreciate that for sure. Marisa, I think we have buried the lead for many in our audience who are from St. Louis. This book is set in St. Louis in 1973. Of all the cities out there, London, Paris, Seattle, Vancouver, New York City, why did you choose St. Louis?
Well, for a number of reasons. I knew a lot of choices that I make as a writer are really intuitive, and they don't necessarily have great analysis analysis behind them, but I felt in my gut that this was a story that took place in the Midwest. I think probably because my childhood up until the age of 7 took place in the Midwest. I'm from Ohio. But I chose to set it in St. Louis because it is a city that I am fascinated by, curious about, and a little bit familiar with because I am married to a St. Louisan and have been coming to the city for these last 30 years of my life, and always with great curiosity and great, it's just a fascinating city to me. The history is fascinating. The look of it is fascinating. I'm interested in the different environments as you drive around the city. And so it just felt like a wonderful place to set a novel, and I set it here, or there.
Well, I sure appreciate that, and I'm sure many in our audience know that your husband is Ken Kwapis, the Hollywood director from Malcolm in the Middle to Friends, The Office. Of course, you two co-directed a movie called He Said, She Said. Maybe we'll touch upon that before this hour is over. But I know that the characters in your novel are driving frequently on Kensington, which is one of our most famous streets in literature and the movies, because, of course, in Meet Me in St. Louis, the home was at 5135 Kensington. Was that purposeful on your part?
Not at all. And I did not even know that was true. And
You gotta be kidding me.
I'm delighted. No, I didn't. That's one part of St. Louis history I didn't know.
Oh my gosh. I thought it was an homage to somebody.
No, I had driven around St. Louis, and I had found this house that in my mind looked like the house that they would live in Maplewood, and it happened to be on the corner of Kensington. And so, but I did not know that Kensington had that illustrious history. But now I'm very happy to have added to it.
Oh my gosh. Well, of course, there are many St. Louis landmarks, and one girl lives, I think, in Webster, and the other lives in Maplewood. One attends Mary Queen of Peace. I'm not exactly sure of the school for the other, but these families are different. And sometimes we look back at we look back at any age and we think, oh, how idyllic and peaceful the past was. But this was the Vietnam era, and as you kind of show us, things were not idyllic for these two families.
Yeah, I mean, I said it in 1973 exactly because of that reason. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it was a really, my memory of that time, and then in my research and the history, it was kind of it was time of languishing in this country, I think. The Vietnam War was sort of cranking to a close, but the feeling that we all had after that was over was of sort of a depression, I think, a kind of global, or a countrywide sense of, what a failure on so many levels. How many people were killed? How many, it succeeded at nothing except for destruction. And I think that left a kind of pall. It was also a moment where, as you might remember, there was a recession in the 70s. And I well remember the gas lines and we stopped eating red meat and all those sorts of things. So it was a time of a lot of economic stress. And I think, and also Watergate was happening. So there was this like triumvirate of extremely stressful things taking place that I think made people question government, the economy, the leadership, in ways that left people feeling a little bit at a loss. There were also wonderful things happening. It was really the beginning, the launch of the second wave feminism. And that is certainly part of the book. So it just felt like a really rich historical moment, and one that sort of added to the tension that exists for both of these families in different ways.
Well, there's a lot of tension, and you really hit some of the real nerve centers in our DNA when it comes to fears, going to war, being separated from your mom, losing a loved one, losing a business. These are all aspects in the mysteries, and I'll tell you what, if you're not emotional reading this book, you might want to check your pulse, because it really gets to you. I mean,
I hope there's a lot of joy too. I mean, it's a book that obviously it circles around a tragedy, as was said in the introduction. But I think the point in writing this book was to examine how a group of people move through that tragedy and how their lives are certainly utterly shaped by it and changed by it. But what interests me is how people endure. I look at the newspaper all the time, and you see these events happening in the news that are so cataclysmic, and you think, how do people manage? And yet people endure. And I think people endure in small ways and large ways. And that is something kind of heartening about human nature. There is a spirit of endurance, and there's a spirit of a lot of trauma can happen, a lot of tragedy, but there's also kind of this yearning for continuance. And that really is what excited me about writing this book, is how does this group of people, how do the terms of their life change as a result of this central tragedy that happens? And then how do they all piece it together and move forward with some joy, actually, and some hope.
You may not know this, but of course, we should probably describe some of your characters. You have Celeste and William, who are the parents of Ellen. Celeste had a difficult life, separated from her mom, and actually it's rather similar to what A.E. Hotchner went through in his book, King of the Hill, which was a true story based in St. Louis. Very similar there. Also, in your book, you draw on so many different themes, and as you point out, there is hope in a lot of it. At the same time, sometimes I wonder if one of your themes is taking care of children. I've often wondered, is it easier to be at home taking care of the kids, or is it easier to go to the office? I think going to the office is. And all four parents kind of experience the trials and tribulations of child rearing.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big theme. I think taking care of children is a complicated, obviously very complex, but I think what my interest in writing about it has to do with the ambivalences of it. I mean, we all think that we're supposed to be perfect parents and we're supposed to love our children unconditionally, which, we probably do. But there's also a lot of ambivalence in parenting, and there's a lot of fear in parenting. And there's, I remember, once thinking, boy, I think my job is just to keep my children alive. I mean, that may be, as I watch them, ram into walls and rush out across a yard and towards cars. But I think, so I wanted to write a lot about the tensions and the ambivalences of rearing children. The other thing is that the central character in this novel, who is this 7-year-old girl named Miggy, who is this kind of unruly, ungovernable child, she creates a lot of tension in her family.
Yes.
And parents, they love her. They try to parent her as best they can, but she's a rough one to parent. And, she's a little girl who sort of has her fist raised to the world. She wants to sort of elbow the limits all around her, and she's only 7. There's very little that she can do, and that frustrates her. And she and they've also parented her in a fairly permissive way. They let her, that she's aware of what's going on in the world. She sees the news. She's they take her to protest marches, and yet she doesn't fully understand. Of course, she doesn't understand what those things are. So a lot of the book is about this young girl who is trying desperately to grasp what some of the meanings of her life are. And as in response to this tragedy that happens, that she has to really confront some big questions. And those are the mysteries, the mysteries of, what it is to be alive.
Right. Well, her parents are Jean and Julian, but Julian is especially permissive. Why is he so permissive?
I think both Jean and Julian were children of the 60s, and they sort of fashioned themselves as, as many kids did in that era, of sort of taking up the anti-war, flag, and they were anti-government, and they were, they went down to Mexico after college and kind of, lived that life, and were very, and so I think that they had this idea of and they were very young when they had children. And I think they had an idea of childhood as being something that they didn't want to put limits on their child, and they didn't want to lie to her the way they had both been lied to as children of the the 40s and the 50s. So we all sort of swing the other way, right? And as parents, we all make choices that our parents didn't make, and then our children will make the opposite choices. And so they've made a series of choices based on ways in which they were raised that they don't appreciate. And it's good and bad, maybe is certainly a self-actualized child. She's not someone who she feels good about who she is, but she's also confronted with a lot of information that she can't make sense of.
And remember, this is 1973. Her parents didn't have the technology that parents have today to occupy the children. I mean, you had 3 television stations and maybe 1 UHF and no video games.
I think that's for better.
I agree. I do agree. I do agree. Yeah. Hey, at one point, Celeste goes back, and I won't give all the details, but she meets someone who's very important in her past. And I was wondering, have you ever done that? After the years go by, seek out somebody that you have not been in contact with either an important or a not so important message?
That's a great question. And I don't know how everybody else feels, but I think during the pandemic, a lot of that was happening.
Yes.
I think a lot of people were reaching out to one another who hadn't spoken in a really long time. I'm not entirely sure why that happened, but for sure, I reached out to people and people reached out to me who I hadn't spoken to in a long time. And maybe it's some need for, this is not the case with Celeste. She does it for a very particular reason, which I don't want to give away because it's,
Right.
one of the interesting things to learn about in the book. But I think that, during the pandemic, there was a sense of needing community and needing to knit up parts of our life. Like we were all feeling a little bit lost. And there's something comforting about reaching out to somebody you knew in grade school. It makes your life feel continuous in a certain way. But that's not what's going on in the book. What's going on in the book is her need to connect to somebody who was critically important in her child's life.
Yeah. And one thing you point out is that families have secrets. Do we really ever know the people we're married to and what their secrets are?
That's a great point. And somebody once asked me, what do I feel like that are there certain themes that are common in all my work? And my answer was, yeah, exactly that I sort of feel like we don't really know one another. I mean, we try to, and we sort of struggle to be intimate with each other. We struggle to, but I think at the end of the day, there are such, there are ways in which we don't know each other. The reason I wrote this book was because of my father who told me this story that something happened to him when he was young. And that had to do with I don't want to be coy, but the central kind of drama of the book. And he told me it very casually, even though it's quite a strong thing. And then he never mentioned it again. And I never knew anything more about it. And I thought, wow, he passed away about 8 or 9 years ago. And I thought, it's amazing to me that I never asked him. There's so many questions we don't ask each other. There's so many, and even when we get answers, it's hard to know another person. So I think that what you say is really a strong theme of the book.
Well, I think I know what you're talking about with the one question, but there's another one too where I don't think I'm giving away the plot here, but Celeste is not enamored with her husband's sisters. But I don't think she says it, but you never know. Now you better be careful because your husband Ken might have relatives here in the St. Louis area. So
I think some of them are maybe watching right now.
Okay, and you love all, which is, we'll put it that way. But there are those little secrets that we do have, whether it's the family business or the in-laws, or also here's something that you addressed that has not been addressed, as far as I can see, in mainstream literature in a long time, and that's postpartum depression.
Yeah,
that was a big topic years ago, and maybe because of antidepressants or something, doesn't it seem to you as if it's kind of off the radar now in terms of popular discussion?
Well, I think people have postpartum depression, but I think it's treated. It's funny that you mentioned that because when I was writing about that, and for the viewers, the mother of Celeste experiences postpartum depression, and I got a child and birthing book from the era. And I used it, in the book, and basically it said, you have the baby blues and get over it. That was about the level of psychological acuity that was given to women. It was a time when women's health was not taken very seriously. And so she does have that, and she doesn't really understand it. And, her husband it is sort of understanding, but he doesn't get it. And it certainly changes the relationship she has with her daughter, Ellen, who feels very confused by her mother's withdrawal. And that becomes a big part of what's going on between that mother and daughter in the book.
Right. And speaking of secrets, I bet your mother did this because I know mine did. Did you? And I grew up in Ohio as well. Did you ever get dropped off at school by your mom when she was still in her nightgown? Yeah.
Well, you know what's, yes, absolutely. And
But there was a coat over it, of course, and no one was supposed to know.
Yeah, that's definitely in the book. But you know what's really true about that era that is certainly not true anymore is that when I was 7, I walked to school with my sister all by myself.
Wow.
And I
Oh,
feel like
yes.
that was an era and it's a funny thing because it wasn't safer, but parents were less fearful, I think, in that era. And so I, you know, there, and I think you see it in this book as well. I mean, Miggy runs out on the street and she runs up to the corner and she runs back. That's allowed. And I think that that's not simply because her parents are permissive. It's because there was a sense of safety that we don't have anymore. So it's definitely a book that it's set in its time and it partakes of the ethos of the time and the way people experienced life at the time. There, you know, I mean, certainly the character of Miggy, who at this, you know, if she were a little girl now, she would probably be medicated. You know, people would have medicalized her zest and her zeal, and but there's nothing wrong with her. She's simply a child who's just sparking with life, and doesn't. She's not a shy or, you know, retiring child. So I tried hard to sort of get into the mindset of the era for a lot in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, I think you did, and St. Louis too. Now, what part of Ohio are you from?
I'm from Cleveland. Where are you from?
Cleveland. I'm the west side. You must have been the east side.
I was the east side, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're almost exactly the same age. So, in fact, I think we are. So, anyway, my family lived in Fairview Park, but then moved to Shaker Heights after my mother passed away in 1982. And it's a beautiful town, not dissimilar from St. Louis. It's got its distinctions for sure, but it's a great place, I think, to grow up. At least it
way more
was.
time in St. Louis than I have in Cleveland, Ohio. So I feel like in some ways, even though I am not of St. Louis, I know it better, and I have a, you know, sometimes when you're a writer, it's not even just the facts, it's having a sense of a place, a sense of memory. I once wrote a book called The God of War, which takes place in the desert, in the Mojave Desert, east of Los Angeles. And honestly, I just would go there and just feel it, you know, and feel what I felt in that space. And that's what I wrote about. And so the ability to be in St. Louis as much as I have been, and just to sort of have my feelings about the place apart, above and beyond, you know, facts and figures, just how I feel. That's something that I draw on as a writer.
Where did you write the book, and when did you write it?
I wrote the book over the last 3 years, and I wrote it both in Los Angeles, where I live, and then I had a fellowship in New York City at the public library, and I wrote it, a large part of it during that year in New York City.
Marisa Silver, this new career of yours is so different from your previous life as a filmmaker, because I'm sure many know, maybe some of our viewers don't know, there was a time in your life when you were directing Keanu Reeves and Danny Aiello and Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Perkins and others. And it seems to me, being a novelist, this is your 7th, is so different from producing movies for the big screen. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, you know, you're right in a lot of fundamental ways, but in some ways, a lot of the craft is shared. You know, when you're making a film, you're thinking about point of view, you're thinking about how you're piecing together a film, which is not so different from how you structure a novel. You're thinking about you know, relationships and tension and all the sorts of things that make a film work. In some ways, a lot of them have to do with what make a novel work. I mean, the difference in writing a novel, and the one reason why I love it so much and have no desire to go back to filmmaking, is that you can write what a person's thinking. You can write their interior life. In a film, you are reliant on an actor's face and on behavior. You really can't really be inside their thoughts. And so for me, as a novelist, I feel like I have more latitude to be, because I can be inside each character and I can express their interior, their consciousness in a way that as a filmmaker, I couldn't do. Yep. I also like it because I have more control. I don't have to, you know, I can make all the decisions, and I like that.
Right. You don't have to deal with Brad Whitford or Alyssa Milano or anyone else who doesn't
I
want
don't have to deal with a studio. I don't have to deal with, all the people that try to get in and make decisions for you. The actors are wonderful. The actors were a pleasure and exciting to work with. That's, a wonderful thing to watch a good actor at work. But, when you're making film, a lot of people are trying to stir the sauce with you.
Now, you're in Vancouver. Is Ken now directing something in Vancouver and you're up there with him?
He is here in Vancouver and I am with him and I'm writing a new book and he's working on a show.
Well, it seems like a great place with a lot of inspiring areas to help the both of you in your artistic ways. Let me ask you a little something about the book and the future, because I think a lot of people are going to want to read this in book clubs and discuss it. And I'm hoping that you're going to be able to maybe tour the country and appear at, book fairs and festivals and discuss this with people in person, especially those who've read it, because here we are kind of dancing around some of the main themes because we don't want to give away the plot. But wouldn't it be nice if you could meet with people who have read it, who can then pose to you, specific questions about the characters and the development?
Yeah, I mean, that's always wonderful because, sometimes I feel like when you write a book, that's only kind of half the experience. It's not until someone reads it that the book is sort of complete, right? And every single reader reads it differently. And so to get to talk to people and hear how they receive the book or what they liked or maybe what they didn't like or what they didn't understand or, that's a wonderful thing to do because it kind of makes the book complete for me. So yeah, I mean, it's a little, it's a funny time to be putting a book out when we're in a virtual world, but readers are still reading. I mean, one of the most heartening things about this past year was people didn't stop reading books and they didn't stop buying books. And I tell you, writers are grateful.
Well, I got to tell you something. Books can take you out of your daily life. And if you're sequestered during a pandemic, how else are you going to get to St. Louis if you're in Oregon, or how are you going to get to London, or are you going to get to a different epic period? So I think that's a very important part. I think that books can transform you to another place, and in a difficult time, when it's Trump versus Biden during a pandemic, holy moly, it's nice to get away.
That was a stressful year. Yes, it is really nice to get away. And it's also nice sometimes to read books where you and begin to think about your own experience through the experience of other characters. Yes. And I think that's one of the reasons why we love to read is because we are absorbed in other characters' lives, but somehow they reflect back on us. They reflect our lives to ourselves. And that's a pretty wonderful experience. And hopefully with the mysteries, that will be the case as well. I mean, these are not, they may not be characters who are like you, but their experiences might sort of reflect your experience in and make you think about it in a different way.
Have you ever thought, okay, this took place in 1973, so the parents today would be about 80, and Miggy is now 60 or so years old?
Yeah.
Did you ever think of that?
I at one point when I was writing the novel, I thought about writing it from the point of view of an adult Miggy looking back on this that happened. But I ultimately decided that wasn't the right choice, that I wanted to be kind of right there in the world of a 7-year-old. And I wanted to really try to understand her experience right at the ground level. Yeah. But sadly, no one would be dead.
I know I've always known this to be true, but your novel, The Mysteries, really drove it home. In life, it seems so unfair. A single solitary second can change the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, every single solitary second changes our lives, and sometimes more, kind of drastically than others. But yeah, it's a novel a lot about fate. It's like, what do we do with fate, and how do we face up to it? How do we move forward? Some things really are literally not in our control, and what do we do? Yeah.
Why, that's exactly right. And I think authors like you have been mulling that for a long time. Does that then kind of give the reader, or maybe even the author, a sense that, hey, you have to capture the moment and make the best of what you have right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for these characters who are undergoing this tremendous cataclysm, it's shattering. And then you, as I said earlier, you put one foot in front of the other, and, you move on is really not the right word, because you're going to be carrying it forward with you. but you continue to live the days of your life, and those days, are you're carrying this thing that happened, but you're also investing in newness. So yeah, absolutely.
When you were growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, what did you read?
Well, interestingly enough, I was a terrible reader when I was a child. I know most authors tell you that they had their face buried in a book, but I was a daydreamer. I was not a reader. I sat in a chair. We had a wonderful swivel chair, and I sat in this chair and I think spun stories. And that may be the beginning of my life as a writer, even though I didn't know it. But I didn't take to reading until I was really in my early teens. I mean, of course I read books, but I wasn't like one of those obsessive kid readers. I think I was an obsessive kid daydreamer.
Oh, is that right? But who are your inspirations when it comes to writing today? Do you look to certain authors as your muses?
No, I think I read really variously, and I take from a lot of different writers, different things. I'm always interested in craft, right? Because that's something that I'm always working with. So I will read books, really trying to figure out how writers did it. How did they use the flashback? Why did they change point of view? I mean, I'm always asking those kinds of very writerly questions of the books that I read. And it can be anything from Flaubert to a potboiler that can give me some insight into, my craft.
How many husbands and wives both delivered books within the last 12 months?
Yes.
10 came out with, but what I really want to do is direct, which also has a lot of St. Louis in it. It's available at Left Bank Books. We recommend that. And now you, I mean, wow, you guys are really prolific.
It was a fun year in that way. And it was really wonderful. Ken wrote his first book, and it was pretty exciting to see him have that experience. And it's very different from the experience of making films. And I think that he was delighted. And yeah, it's been a fun year in that way.
Yeah. I think you mentioned you're already writing another book at this time. Can you tell us a little something about that?
No, I don't want to be coy, but I never talk about books before they're done because, it's such a fragile thing. And I sort of feel like if I talk about them, it's almost like then I've done the work of it. And why would I write it if I can tell the story? I have to tell the story by writing it. So no, I'll wait until it's done in a few years. Hopefully I'll be here again and with a new book.
Well, fair enough. Are you still teaching writing in Asheville, North Carolina?
Yeah, I teach at an MFA program in North Carolina called Warren Wilson, and I love it. It's a wonderful program, and I love teaching writing. I love being able to talk about the craft of writing. It's something as I said, I spend a lot of time thinking about. I love working with students. It's really a satisfying kind of other half of my life, the writing and the teaching.
I've never been there, but I understand it's a beautiful setting for anything, and I'm sure it's a beautiful setting for writing.
Yeah, it's beautiful in the mountains there. It's great.
And are your students undergraduates or postgraduates?
They are master's degree students. So that is the final degree that you can get as a writer. And so, and they're, so they're very serious. They're very focused on trying to, publish, and it's a wonderful thing to work with them.
Well, I'll tell you, they say, or at least Stephen Ambrose said half of it, the battle, he's the late historian, that it's getting up in the morning and putting the backside of your seat next to the chair in your office. You got to do it.
Yeah, it's not it's not waiting for the muse to strike. It's about sitting down and writing words on a piece of paper.
Yes. Is there ever the possibility that the mysteries would continue with Miggy later in life?
No, I feel like I've never had a feeling in terms of any novel or story that I've ever written that there would be a sequel or it would continue. I feel like I've told the story about these people that I wanted to tell, and now I'm done.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. I heartily recommend that folks, and we're going to turn things over to Shane in just a moment here, but if you have a book club especially, I think this is great, because I think that if you read it to yourself, which is wonderful, I think you'll say, man, I want to discuss this with somebody who's read it. And so to all those out there who are reading books, with others, either virtually or in person, socially distanced, however you're doing it these days, I heartily recommend The Mysteries, especially if you're in St. Louis, you get a kick out of the local flavor. Shane, I know we have questions from the viewers, and so we're going to send it back to you to take it away.
All right. Thank you. Incredible conversation, as always. Charlie, so good. And Marisa, like, just wonderful having you here tonight.
Thank you.
I believe that because I thought I did my research on this event, and but I missed somehow that you were married to Ken, who directed my childhood favorite movie, Follow That Bird.
Follow That Bird, the best movie.
The best movie. Yeah. And I think this also makes you the first couple that I've hosted virtually separate, because we had Marlo Thomas and Phil Donahue appear together. But I think you are the first authors that I've hosted separately, virtually, in the past year. So congratulations on
that wonderful designation. Thank you.
I have to always have something new happening. So like a new record, a new thing, like, yeah. All right, so I want to start with my first question. We do have several questions from the audience. I have one that I have had since the very beginning of the evening that I want to ask. So the title is The Mysteries, and I feel like that is pretty apt. And I'm wondering how you decided on that title, at what point in the process, and do you feel like it is going to maybe not even like accidentally, because there would be arguments for why it could get placed in the mystery section. Like I guarantee that at some point in the next, like,
yeah, I'm not sure it should be ever placed in the mystery section, but you know, that this title came to me right off the bat. I think that I knew even before I was writing that it was going to be a book that circled around sort of the unanswerable questions, and about this little girl sort of beginning to understand that certain questions are unanswerable. I mean, what I love about life is that as much as we want to know, it's also good not to know. It's just good to keep asking questions. And I think that's something that all the characters in this book come up against and come to understand. They want to know answers to why things happened. And I think that what they all come to understand in very different ways, including Miggy in her own 7-year-old way, is that you can't know, and that that's part of being alive.
Question from Eileen. We all have our all-time favorite authors and are always discovering new ones. What authors have always drawn you in, and are there new authors and works you have discovered, whether contemporary or from past decades or centuries? And Eileen says, looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arlene. I love this question because the minute anybody asks it, my mind goes blank, and it's as though I've never ever read a book in my life. I keep saying to myself, you have to keep a list next to you of books that you love so that you can tell people. Here's a couple of books that I adore. One is by William Maxwell, and it's called So Long, See You Tomorrow. And it is really a beautiful book, also about childhood in a certain way, but it's a kind of reflection of an older man on something that happened in his childhood. It's a book that I love and I turn to over and over again. I also love, thinking about books with children in it. The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, if I pronounce that correctly, which is just an astonishingly wonderful book set in India. I read short stories. I love Mavis Gallant. I love Alice Munro. I love William Trevor. And in terms of novels, I mean, there's so many, and they're all over the place. There's not one that I turn to or one author that I turn to, but I do love the writer Shirley Hazard, who wrote a book called The Great Fire and others. And I love the books of Pat Barker, who wrote a trilogy called the Regeneration Trilogy about World War I. I mean, this is like dinner table discussion but all the books that I love, but those are some of them.
Yeah. Since Charlie brought up A.E. Hotchner earlier, I was wondering if either of you have read his last book that he wrote before he passed, because it is quite fantastic and dealing with a lot of the same things that King of the Hill dealt with.
Sadly, I haven't read it yet. I will say looks very approachable. I have it on my desk, and I'm to my eternal regret, I did not talk to him before he passed away, and I wish I had.
Mm.
It's a quick read. It's pretty pretty tight. So yeah, and very St. Louis, like incredibly steeped in St. Louis. So I loved it. Emiliana says, you mentioned reading a birthing and parenting book from the era that The Mysteries is set in. Is there a piece of research from this project that sticks out as particularly intriguing or impactful to the plot and characters?
That's a wonderful question. Let me think about that. One of there is a trip that Miggy and her class take to the Cahokia Mounds, which is someplace that I've been many times, because it seems like whenever we go to St. Louis, the family goes to the Cahokia Mounds. This is our tradition. But I ended up doing a lot of research about the Cahokia Mounds because I got very curious about the history of it. And although it doesn't actually, it impacts it in a sort of a glancing way, but I was very fascinated by that it is the largest kind of ancient civilization in North America, which is kind of amazing to me. So that was one thing that was really fascinating to me. I learned about there was a great flood in the river in 73. That was interesting to me, and wonderful photographs, and I used that. There were so many things, but the wonderful thing about research is that it creates ideas for scenes and ideas for characters. So the more I learned about St. Louis, the more the book seemed to come alive.
Yeah. Speaking of characters, do you find it easier to write adult characters or characters, the children?
Children are hard. You think, when I started this book, I thought, oh, this will be easy. I was a kid. I raised some kids. I know kids. But getting inside of the mind of a child in an accurate way is much harder than you think. And part of this, the real challenge of writing this book for me was finding the exact tone that would give us a sense of who Miggy was. And I think I read those opening pages because a lot of that, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the tone that would give us a sense of her kinetic quality and her hard charging quality and her restlessness and the sparking of her mind. And it had to do with the rhythm of the language, and it had to do with really having a sense of how this little girl experienced the moments of her life. And it's much, and I think when we write children, I didn't want to write it from an adult point of view. I didn't want to, look down on Miggy with a lot of perspective. I wanted to be inside her life that has very little perspective. So that was actually much harder for me than writing an adult, because an adult, you have the latitude to get inside their mind. They have perspective. They understand context. They may misunderstand themselves. They may misunderstand the things that are going on in their life, but they have a wealth of experience to draw on in order to make sense of what's happening to them. But a little girl doesn't have a lot of experience in order to make sense of what's happening to her.
And it sounds to me like you do a ton of research, and a lot of very detailed research that really help with your previous books and with this book kind of flush out the world and really get deep into a very imaginative and creative, but very real place.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that makes a book come alive are details, and the specific details. So you don't need to know everything about a town, say St. Louis, but if you know where she gets her favorite ice cream, and you know what the the sign looked like, so that when she sees the sign, you know how she feels. I mean, I'm making this up, it's not in the book, but that kind of detail allows you inside of a character. I think it's the details that bring characters alive to us. It's not sort of the general, it's the very specific. It's how each of us experience each specific detail in our life. So the more research you can do to understand what your character would be seeing, or what she would be feeling, or what the weather is like, or, you know, in a critical moment, the seed pods are falling down from a tree and they're smearing that. So you want to know what kind of seed pods are falling at that moment, and what would it look like when it smears the windshield. And so all that stuff, I think, is why we feel stories come alive for us.
And by the way, that answer was Velvet Freeze in your book, The Mysteries.
Yes. I did a lot of research about Velvet Freeze. I'm very interested in it.
I don't think it's around anymore. Is it, Shane?
I've never heard it, so.
Oh, okay. You're too young. But it was a St. Louis institution. When they write the book about St. Louis in 2021, they'll refer to Ted Drew's as where the children went.
Yeah. I mean, now that you're saying Ted Drew's, I want that right now, that custard. I think that, you know, like for Velvet Freeze is a great example, because, and the internet is now this, you know, incredible resource. I mean, they had you know, you could find out what kind of ice cream was made in September of 1973 from the internet, what flavors they were selling. I mean, it's kind of incredible. So that detail, when something is that specific, that's like gold for a writer.
Eileen agrees that it had to be Velvet Freeze, and David says that there is no more Velvet Freeze.
Sadly. Yeah.
One of my favorite things to hear about from authors of kind of historical fiction is copy editors. And I'm wondering if there were any particular instances of like a copy editor like trying to tell you there's like, this didn't exist, this didn't happen, whatever the case may be, and you saying, nope, I got it right here.
No, and in fact, you know, I think it's up to the author really to get it right. You know, you can't count on your copy editor to have done your research. They can do some, but that's not entirely their job. Their job is so there were moments when the copy editors did catch me on a few things that I'd gotten wrong, which was fantastic. But it was really up to me to make sure, you know, the toys she's playing with were in fact toys in 1973. You know, that the, you know, the clothes that she was wearing, they were wearing, I mean, Keds, of course, Keds. But so that's kind of up to the author. Again, the copy editor did catch a few faults, but it's really up to you to make sure you've got it right. Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, like, why? Like, I guess it is sometimes very important, but like I've had an author in a fiction book, like, have a copy editor tell them that the moon was not full on the night that they said the moon was full, and it's like,
well, you know what? When I wrote the first story I ever published in the New Yorker was a story about a woman who's a chauffeur, like a limo chauffeur, and she's driving on a particular route in Los Angeles that goes underneath. It's underneath a freeway, and it kind of winds underneath a freeway, which is on top. And the copy editor, I don't know if it was a he or she, said that the car would not be on the right side of the freeway here. In other words, this person had gotten a map and had traced my route and realized that I was wrong, that at that moment the car would have been on the left side of the freeway. And I had the same thought. I thought, really? And then I thought, thank God, because you know what? There's always a reader who will drop out of the story. You know, for one reader, they realize that's not accurate. You've kind of lost them. So you do want to be as accurate as you can be. I mean, you can make up a lot. I mean, a lot of this, you know, I've made up, you know, geographies and things. There's a certain amount of, you know, liberalness that every writer can take. But, you know, you kind of want to, if you're writing about a real thing, you kind of want to be accurate so that you don't lose a reader.
That copy editor, boy, is worth his or her weight in gold. That's amazing. I have a question about novelists from Cleveland, because I can name rock stars from Cleveland, from Eric Carmen to Michael Stanley. I can name actors and entertainers, Bob Hope and Halle Berry, Paul Newman, Deborah Winger. I don't think I can think of a novelist from Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm sure there are many, but one of them who's, very contemporary and very well known is Celeste Ng, who wrote,
Yeah.
so her books, and now I'm forgetting the name of her book. What is it called?
Oh, oh goodness. I can see the beautiful cover.
Beautiful, but Little Fires Everywhere.
Yeah. I was
so-
trying to think of the other one though.
Right. So she's I'm sure there are many authors from Ohio and Cleveland, but I can't, but she's, certainly put her name on the map with her books. So.
Isn't this funny? We're both Clevelanders and we didn't know it. My dad lived on Shelburne in 2 different homes. And that's a beautiful part of the country, but people outside of Cleveland have no idea, do they?
No, Cleveland is one of those cities that gets a lot of grief from people, but
Shane's too young to know this, but when the Tonight Show was on in the 1970s, I think Johnny Carson made a joke about Cleveland at least once a week. You could never do something like that now, you just wouldn't do it. But along with Burbank, California, they got razzed a lot too, nationally. Yeah. Of course, the river did catch fire, so there was that, as did the mayor's hair once. But anyway,
every city has its it can be made, but for some reason, yeah.
Yeah, we do have one last question from the audience, and
Sure.
Billy can raise her. Actually, the one that I was trying to think of, everything I never told you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the other Celestine. So Lee, who I believe you might be related to, is asking, do you see this book or any of your novels becoming a film or TV drama?
That's a good question, and it certainly could, and I would be happy if it did. But I don't really spend much time trying to make that happen. I think the fallout of having been in the film business and being aware of the film business is I know how very difficult it is to get anything made. So I decided that I was not going to put a lot of effort into that. And should it happen, I'm delighted, and it's a lovely way for another artist to take a look at the material and make something new out of it. But I'd rather write another book. I'd rather than focus on that.
Yeah.
I once read an interview of you where you were asked to recommend an actor for a certain role, and you came up with the name Laurie Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know she's from Southern Illinois, not too far from where your husband Ken grew up?
Yeah, I did know that. That's true. I didn't think of that at the time, but that is true.
You've got a thing for people in our area, I think, at least the Southern Illinoisans.
I think it's my Midwestern birth that, there's a connection.
Well, she's a great talent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both. Tonight has been so enjoyable. A reminder that we have copies of the mysteries available for sale at left-bank.com. You can actually come in and pick up a whole stack of them, because we have a whole stack on the front table, and just walk over to the register because you'll want to give one to each of your friends. So great belated Mother's Day present, whatever you want to do for anyone on your list of gifts to give. This is perfect. And Charlie.
Thank you again, Shane, and thank you, Charlie. It's a wonderful discussion.
Thank you. And if anyone's late with their Mother's Day gift, heaven help you. There'll be heck to pay in your household.
Charlie, it's a pandemic. Some of us haven't put things in the mail yet.
Well, and there's a lot of holidays coming up in 2021. And as I said, it's perfect for your book club, because you're going to read this, folks, and you're going to want to say, I want to discuss this with people who have read it. You really will. It's the one book you're going to read, and you can't stop talking about it.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. Take care, Marisa.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shane.
To the audience, thank you so much for joining us. Check out our event calendar for more fantastic events, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.